Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Whole whole thing, dude.
American public and global public finally understands UFOs are real.
Non-human, exotic origin, vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
All right, James, how's things?
Well, considering about 15 minutes ago, I was sledding down a hill with a couple of 10-year-olds. Pretty good.
Good stuff. Yeah, it's funny, like you mentioned just before we jumped on, I've got a load of snow just dropped last night here in the UK, and I'm flying out to the US tomorrow, but I think everything's going to be okay, but it just comes out of nowhere.
It's so funny because it wasn't on which is usually pretty accurate. There's an app for weather, and we were all kind of bummed because we got a warm streak last week and all the snow melted, and then there was nothing on the horizon for more snow. And then lo and behold, last night it dumped, 6-8 inches. So we grabbed the sleds and headed for the hills.
Nice. Can't beat it.
Such good fun. Such good fun.
Yeah. Well, listen, James, I want to talk about the program and that, but let's just look back. You've done, I think, UFOs, 50 Years of Denial, Out of the Blue, I Know What I Saw, The Phenomena, Moment of Contact, and here we are with the program. What's the initial reaction been for the new documentary?
So I did 50 Years of Denial, then I did Out of the Blue, and then I did an Out of the Blue director's cut, which took me about 2.5 years. I never know what to say about that one. Is that like a half a movie? What is that?
No, I don't know. I'd call it a separate entity. I think it had enough extra material in it.
Yeah, I think it was quite significant change. I mean, really significant. But in any case, I tend to push the envelope a little bit with each film I put out. Case in point, Moment of Contact had reports of live aliens walking through the town of Varginha, Brazil in 1996, and a couple of capture, and one of the officers died allegedly from contact with one of these creatures. And with the program, I feature again a bit. I push it a bit more with an alleged incident that took place in 1994 at Nellis Test Range, Nevada, about an alleged face-to-face contact with, I guess, an alien. If true. So I always anticipate criticism, and skepticism is healthy, but I tend to report on these things not because I wholeheartedly believe beyond a shadow of doubt that it happened, but that I feel that there's enough compelling evidence to at least merit reporting, and with the hope that other people that would have been involved would come forward and validate.
Yeah, that's understandable. I agree. I think that's fair enough. So, it's probably 3 weeks now since release. Is it as you'd expected, as you'd wished it to be, the reaction?
Yes. I think we have a pretty good online presence, social media. I'm told it's getting out there. We got Joe Rogan within the first week or so. He hadn't seen the film, but it was great just getting on his show and talking about it. And he's got a massive audience. I mean, just huge. I think it's probably bigger than anything in mainstream. Probably bigger than 60 Minutes, Nightline, Dateline, Anderson Cooper, Fox News, all combined. I don't know, but yeah, and it's a more organic, very grassroots effort. I mean, there's people within the community that have been supporting the movement. I'm not so sure mainstream knows quite how to handle this one. And I say this one, I mean, allegations of a crash retrieval program is a rather slippery slope for some, and I get it, So, but I think it'll have legs.
Good. That's good. And I have to ask, is this documentary safe? Is it in your hands now? Because I know you've had some serious issues with revenue and things from previous pieces of work.
Oh my God, that's putting it mildly. I have not had a legitimate royalty since April 15th to May 15th, 2023 was the last royalty I got. So, I had a couple trickle in that was enough for a tip at a table, but essentially, yeah, it was an absolute catastrophic, worst case scenario as far as I was concerned. With all my films happened to be in this one company. Then I went to another distribution company, and they went belly up. And so we're it's about as independent as we could possibly do. With a distribution company, generally what happens is you produce a relatively complete product. Maybe sometimes they'll provide a bit of completion funds, what at 50 grand, 100 grand, and then they'll put in $250,000 for PR budget, trailer and social media ads, blah blah blah. But we didn't have any of that. This is the first time in history of all the films I've put out since the mid '90s that we did it completely independently. There's a company called Film Hub. I guess they are technically a distributor, but they're more like for us for an aggregator. So we provide the film to them. It goes through what's called quality control (QC). Once you pass QC, it gets in the queue with all the various platforms like Amazon and Apple TV, eventually Google and Vimeo and all the other various platforms. TVOD transactional download initially, but then it'll go to other platforms like maybe with commercials, things of that nature, like Tubi or things of that nature. And then we might make a broadcast deal with like an Amazon or maybe Netflix that would be a non-exclusive, or maybe an exclusive window in the spring of 2025. We'll see what happens. But yeah, we minimize to the best of our ability the likelihood of getting ripped off again. So I cross my fingers that it all works out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it will. Remain positive. Well, listen, James, I was lucky enough to meet up with you and David and Kelly and that back in, I think it was early 2023 during the filming of the program when you were here in my city of Sheffield, England, meeting up with Dr. David Clark to talk about this thing,
Oh, beautiful.
the Calvin craft.
Does the DoD know that you have that replica?
Well,
Are the men in black after you now, or what?
I keep a low profile.
Can't believe you just revealed that right there on live.
Hey, got to give them people the exclusive sometimes. So tell me, James, why the Calvin craft? What is it that sparked that interest for you and why you wanted to feature it in the program?
I remember, I interviewed Nick Pope back in the '90s, early 2000s, on for a number of productions. I was covering Bentwaters, Reynolds from Forest case, his connection with the MOD and investigations that he did subsequent. Obviously, he wasn't there when Bentwaters took place, but he did a cold case or reopening of older cases. And I'd always ask Nick, like, gosh, you're at the desk investigating UFOs. What was the best case? It was the best case you ever heard, And without any hesitation, he would immediately say, and I don't think he used the word Calvine, but he was like, oh man, mate, there's these two hikers in Scotland in broad daylight, and they came upon this very unusual diamond-shaped craft hovering. They happened to have a camera, and they snapped off 5 or 6 shots. And whoa, I remember going, whoa, really? And oh yeah, he goes, really good photo. I was like, how good? He goes, it's just as good as you could ever ask for, and with a military jet. Well, what happened to the pictures? And he basically, I can't remember the exact language he used, but he basically is like, that we buried that story. But we had a print of it at the MOD, and he would describe this poster, and I was, well, who's there now? Who's your predecessor? Like, can we? And I would, quietly nudge him over a period of over a decade, well over a decade, possibly two, just trying to, you know, because I said to him, I was like, they didn't throw the photograph, they wouldn't throw that photograph or those prints away. They did something with them. They're somewhere. Surely we can, people retire, they have a change of, mind or whatever, let it leak out, And so that case, that photograph has been on my mind for over 20 years. So when David Clark and people like yourself um, uh, found Craig Lindsay, the RAF press officer, and he kept that print, that was a huge moment for me because I've been waiting over 20 years to see that. So I think it's one of the best photographic cases in modern history, quite honestly.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, the year and a half leading up to the release of the photograph, I tell you, it was such an up and down period of time because Craig was so unsure about whether to release it or anything like that. And even to the day that David and I drove up to Scotland, we just to meet Craig for the handover, we still didn't know if he was A, going to show up, or B, were we going to have to like ply it out of his hands? Like, it was quite the moment, but yeah, interesting case for sure. And then you actually went up to Calvin as well and met up with Giles Stevens and had a look around. What did it feel like actually being in that location?
Well, when Giles Stevens showed us what he called the most probable location, I knew right away. I was like, this has to be it. I mean, the fence was identical. Even the dangling bits of tree were identical. The landscape was identical. I mean, I felt like this is it. Like I, I would have, I felt 110%. And it was amazing. It was, Craig Lindsay actually decided he was going to hike up to the spot with us, but he got very winded early on, and so he stayed back, and we carried on, and I brought my drone, and David West, who's an amazing photographer, is my DP, came up there, and we did some recreations, and David West got the angle of what most probably was when the photograph was taken, and it was really exciting. Very, very, very exciting. Very exciting to meet Craig Lindsay because Craig Lindsay was the only person that we know that got to speak to the witnesses,
Yeah.
right? And describe that. And one of the most peculiar aspects of it, according to him, was the fact this thing didn't make any noise. And he's like, RAF press officer, like, not airplanes make noise. Things that hover make noise. You can't just hover. What kind of technology is that? And some people think, well, it's either hoax or reflection or maybe a super secret stealth aircraft belonging to some other foreign power or the United States. I tend to lean in the direction of other, but either way, it's I I have zero doubt that case happened, and that object was there when those two witnesses photographed it, and that in my humble opinion, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that would argue differently, that it would fall into the category of other.
That's fair enough. And just like to talk to the hoax aspect of it, they had JARIC, which was the official kind of Ministry of Defense photographic analysis group. They analyzed it. They thought it was legitimate. We've since found out, I think there was another RAF group that analyzed it, again, legitimate. And then there were meetings going on between British intelligence over in the Pentagon with the CIA and other groups. They don't do that if this is a hoax. So,
Well, I thought it was interesting that Nick Pope talks about that meeting years later with an intel guy, I guess part of the MOD, where he said, not the Americans, not the Brits, not any other foreign power, and then he just pointed his finger straight up.
yeah, that's a classic.
Who knows? I mean, I'm as somebody who's investigated landings and alleged close encounters of the third kind that have taken place all around the world, I tend to lean in that direction because if not, that means that someone has been in possession of revolutionary technology at least 35 years and possibly 80. So, which I find hard to believe to hide that for that long. To me, it seems like more unbelievable than the other category to me.
No, I understand. Yeah, and then you add that in with the current revelations of these legacy programs that are, retrieving these craft of non-human intelligence and the reverse engineering. Anything's possible at this. Nothing would surprise me at this day and age. So, what was it that made you kind of focus on the legacy programs when it came to the program? Was it just the current climate?
Well, if any of you out there have seen The Phenomenon, we hint at crash retrievals, and I was incredibly fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to meet with former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who in the United States is a household name. I mean, whether you're a Republican or a conservative, liberal, progressive, Democrat, everybody knows Harry Reid. Like, he was a former Senate Majority Leader. So for Harry Reid to reveal on camera, as he did in The Phenomenon, that what's been released is merely the tip of the iceberg, that's a very profound and significant statement coming from somebody as high up as him. And so, what does that mean? All right, way more than photographic. The implication is that there's hardware and possibly more, right? And then I sort of paused when I finished The Phenomenon, and the natural progression, in my opinion, would have been probably to go more in the direction of the program, which is sort of a follow-up sequel to The Phenomenon. But I hit the pause button and went back to the drawing board with a film. I made a film called Moment of Contact, which took about an alleged crash that happened in Varginha, Brazil. And on my last trip, I think it was my 5th time there. On the last trip, I think it was like 2022, right towards the end of the pandemic. There was I guess a radar flight control officer. I'm trying to remember his name, but so in Brazil, if you work for the fire department, you're part of the military. If you work for the police department, you're part of the military. If you work as, the flight control officers that monitor all planes coming in on radar, right? I think they call it flight control officer. But anyway, this individual came forward on a podcast saying that he was the one that was watching an unauthorized USAF plane come in on January 20th, 1996. USAF is the United States Air Force, and without Brazilian government authorization, and then a high level Brazilian military officer entered his room and said, "Let the plane land," without the authorization, and the plane landed in Campinas, and then either one or two helicopters came out and flew to Varginha, picked up some stuff, came back from Varginha, loaded it on the USAF airplane, and then back to the United States. So I was like, oh, wow. I didn't realize like that the Americans were involved. Like that really cinched it for me. So naturally, someone's very curious. Naturally, I was going to go back to the United States and try to find information about that. What I didn't realize was that just a few months after Moment of Contact was released, I don't know, 6 months, there would be open congressional hearings with the highest level intelligence officer, David Grush, testifying to a bipartisan group of lawmakers under oath that there's a crash retrieval program. I never in 100 million years could have predicted that. I mean, that just made my work that much easier, right? Because I was already on that trajectory, and then that happened. So that was sort of a natural progression, I guess.
And with regards to, after the Moment of Contact came out, there was all these rumors of like videotapes of these alleged beings, with the doctors and stuff like that. What's the latest on that?
Oh, the latest on that is I'm going back in about 10 days.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, there's a guy, Jonathan Bert, I think it was, the Soul Foundation. He approached me and he goes, "Gosh, have you seen the comments and some of the videos that you appeared, particularly when you're on Joe Rogan's?" He's like, "You should. That's a treasure trove of information. A lot of leads in there." And I was like, "I know. Believe me, I've spent months sifting through them, but there are thousands and thousands and thousands on all the various platforms." And he goes, "Well, I'm developing software, AI, that's going to be able to make your job a lot easier." And so There's that happening right now, which is gonna be great because people make comments in the comment zone. "Hey, my dad was here," or "I was there when this happened," or "I was part of this military," but, they're there. There's just thousands and thousands and thousands of comments that you have to sit through to get to them. So that's gonna be incredibly helpful, and I've followed up on a number of leads, much as I possibly could, during the process of making this new film, and I had 11 very solid, uh, I would say out of probably maybe 150 to 200. I've whittled it down to 11 that I'm going to go meet with, and we'll see what happens.
Wow, that's still a good number. 11 potential
They could be
leads.
full of doggy doo doo, and but I tend to think not. I don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes.
Will you be filming this in case you get something so you can maybe do a director's cut of Moment of Contact?
Is the Pope Catholic? I will be going there with a whole crew. Yes.
Amazing, amazing. Oh, I can't wait. Can't wait for any updates on that. Fingers crossed.
The thing is that you're not going to come up with anything without trying, right?
100%. Absolutely. You've got to do these things. Yeah.
Yeah, just like the Cal Vine thing, I mean, that'd been on my radar for over 20 years. You don't just give up. I mean, granted, I was not in the trenches like David Clark was, but it was on my radar. I was like, definitely like, I'm not gonna forget about that one. That one's gonna surface at some point.
Yeah. No, you have to see these things through to the end. I'm a big believer in that. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me just ask you quickly, what's your feeling on that Cal Vine picture? Do you think it's what do you think it was?
I'm
Or what do you think it wasn't?
I'm well, I don't think it was others at this stage. I think from additional sources that aren't necessarily public, I'm leaning towards experimental US technology that was used in the Iraq war back in 1990 as a potential targeting platform for it would target certain locations and then you get the F-117s coming in and bombing them. That's what I believe it is. I can't prove that obviously, but I think from sources that's where I lean towards.
So you think that we've been in possession of anti-gravitics or that sort of technology?
I mean, that's where it gets a bit blurry for me because obviously we've got these descriptions from the two witnesses of it shooting up into the air, but how much was it shooting up in the air? These are where these questions start getting raised for me. Like, was it an exaggeration of something because it was so still and it moved? This is where it's a gray area for me. That's why I can't be fully conclusive, and I don't think I ever will be unless we either speak to the witnesses directly.
So you think that aircraft 35 years ago is still classified today?
Yeah,
And you think so because it's anti-gravitics, or you think because it was filled with hot air?
I don't know. I really don't know why it would
Because
be classified still.
if it was filled with hot air, I can assure you it would not be classified 35 years
No,
later.
I mean that makes sense. So yeah, could well be the technology. Again, there are so many unanswered questions and different avenues where you kind of hit a brick wall and you just can't answer that. So that's why I lean towards one direction, but I'm not fully invested.
What about Richard Greaves talking about these men in suits showing up and scaring the living daylights out of the two witnesses?
I mean, it adds another dimension to the story, doesn't it? It all
Well, I
paints a
mean,
certain.
but are they gonna go to those great lengths to cover up, just a prototype? I mean, they're gonna really threaten people to cover up a prototype?
I don't know how it works. I don't know how it
I mean,
works.
lots of photographs of different prototypes that were previously highly classified had leaked out over the years, and the wing and the SR-71 and, the stealth whatever, and
Yeah,
people's lives weren't. I mean, they went to great lengths to completely just squash the story.
they did. They did.
Unless you don't believe everybody, unless we don't believe Craig Lindsay, you don't believe Richard Greaves, you don't believe Nick Pope.
It's difficult. But there was always rumors of the Calvin craft being a part of the Aurora project as well, which wasn't necessarily one craft, but maybe a multi-platform program. And so that always ties into it. So I kind of have to bear that in mind as well, because that was reported upon a lot back in the 90s with Jane's Defense Weekly and stuff like that.
Aurora program had like a ramjet, and it would skip along the Earth, right? Skip along the atmosphere, and it had a ramjet, but it still didn't have the ability to hover silently. So that was
There was rumor of it being a multi-craft program, though. So they would have had the ramjet, they would have had A, B, C,
that
D.
anti-gravitics.
I mean, this is the thing, it's so. This is why it's just an ongoing case, because there's so many unanswered questions, and we'll never give up on looking and seeing what we can find out going forward. It's
What's the likelihood of tracking down the pilot of that aircraft, of the Harrier? Was it Harrier jump jet, right?
We believe it was again from from a source that was involved with it back into the day with Defense Intelligence, says that there was one UK RAF Harrier and one United States Air Force Harrier as well, circling and flybying this craft. Now we've got a good friend and colleague of mine, Graham Rendell. He's an aviation expert, aviation author, UFO author. He's gone to the ends of the earth to try and track down flight logs. And apparently there are situations where there won't be flight logs for certain, top secret or classified happenings, let's say.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if you're on the inside, like the high level people within the Ministry of Defense, and you've got a Harrier jump jet, you've got a location, you've got a date. I mean, theoretically, one would be able to get those flight logs and find out who was flying the damn thing and what he or she saw.
you'd like to think there'd be something somewhere accessible by someone that could be revealed. I think we have to hope that maybe one of these pilots just comes forward. The same with the witnesses, the two witnesses. We believe one of them is deceased, Ewan, but
Did you hear about Lenval Logan, who was part of the task force? So he saw something in 1990 when he was over in Germany. I don't know exactly where he was flying at the time when they did spot that craft, but he saw it perform, and very interesting development. I think that David Clark and both you and David Clark should get a detailed interview with him about that.
it's a good idea, actually. Yeah, because
'Cause he goes, "That's what I saw." I said, Where did you see it?" He saw it in Europe, no question of that, and he saw it in 1990,
yeah,
and I believe there was even radar of it. There was some kind of footage, some sensory data associated with him visually laying eyes on it, but also there was sensory data collected about the flight characteristics of that object, a diamond-shaped craft in 1990 over Europe, and you could probably find out from Lenval Logan the exact month of that, which would be very interesting. When did the Calvine? What month was Calvine?
August 1990.
August. Okay, well, we should find out from Lenval Logan and find out about that, because that could be a great new development, and quite possibly start making requests for freedom of information. Do you have FOIA requests in Europe? I'm trying to remember the
We
equivalent. Yeah.
do. We do indeed. Yeah. The problem with that is we get a boilerplate responses. There is absolutely, I mean, we've tried time and time again. You get nothing, unfortunately. It's really difficult.
But you didn't necessarily get boilerplate when you got the redacted version of Craig Lindsay, right? Because I'm my understanding is how David Clark found Craig Lindsay. It said RAF press officer and then black and then redacted his name. And then he just looked up RAF press officer 1990 Scotland, and boom, up came Craig Lindsay.
I mean, that was incredible. That was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's great, great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what comes out. I'm always hopeful. I'm always positive that, we'll get somewhere one day. And there are still leads we're working on.
Well, so are you of the camp that a small percentage of UAP or UFOs originate from a non-human intelligence, or do you think they're all conventional sort of secret military stuff? Just curious.
Definitely think there is a percentage of them that represent a non-human intelligence. 100%. Yeah. Very much so. I mean, that's from years of research and then more recently speaking to sources. I'm very lucky to have, some good sources.
I'm told that there's going to be a pretty big story dropping in January at some point in this month.
Told exactly the same thing with conversations that I've been having. So
Yeah, people that I really, really trust told me that.
same here. So yeah, well, I mean, let's talk about that. We've got a mutual friend, one of my sources, who featured in your film, US Navy X. I've been lucky enough to speak to him for a good 6 months now. So tell me about how he came into your radar.
Um, yeah, probably like a couple years ago. I think the second time I went on Rogan, when I was talking about the alleged UFO crash in 1996 in Varginha, Brazil. And I believe that he came on my radar at that point. We had some correspondence for quite some time, but anonymously or no other way, like there was no interest in coming forward, even anonymously, and we kind of went back and forth on it. And then uh, I attended a press, a press conference at NASA headquarters with I held the head of NASA, Bill Nelson's feet to the fire, and it was broadcast live around whoever tuned in around the world, and that sort of rekindled my communication with this individual, and I think that really kind of irked him how David Grush was treated by Nelson, and I think kind of it was like I think I might be ready to come forward, even anonymously kind of thing. And, in my field, is it frustrating? Of course, it's frustrating. It's always frustrating when someone's not willing to put their face on camera, but, there are consequences, right? And there's the fear is real. I mean, it's real. And so, you have to, at the end of the day, um, take what you can get, particularly if you've met these individuals face to face. And you believe them. And then it certainly aligned with everything else that I'd heard. All of his testimony aligned, and he gave some pretty remarkable specifics in terms of where some of these things can be found, which I thought was impressive. Yeah. So, but I mean, yeah. It's unfortunate that people are concerned about not just for their careers, but some of them are concerned for their personal safety, and that's just real. It's not a joke. I mean, it's really happening, and it's unfortunate. And I like whoever's wanted to keep the lid on this goes to great lengths to do it. I mean, I remember interviewing people in Roswell in the '90s when I went to the 50th anniversary, and the cool thing about that is that people that were in Roswell in 1947 when this incident happened, if they were in their 20s, they were then in their 70s, and if they were in their 30s or 40s, they were in their 80s or 90s. So there were, gosh, at least 15 or 20 people that were there. I mean, everybody has this kind of piece of the puzzle, but I heard that they were telling people no uncertain terms that not only if you talk about this, they'll not only be picking your bones out of the desert, but your family's bones. And I heard that over and over and over from people. And that was 1947, right? So let's just assume that obviously Roswell happened as they initially stated it happened, and that other incidents have happened, and the powers that be have gone to great lengths to keep this story, keep a lid on it, you know? But it's coming out.
Well, I agree. I think it is coming out, but you make a good point there with regards to US Navy X. He's still on the inside, and we've seen what's happened to other individuals. So I don't blame him. And I see the frustration online across social media from people saying, if you're not going to give us the evidence or anything like that, then don't say anything at all. But I don't see it like that. I see it. Look, we're getting something. It's better than nothing. And further down the line, we get to look back and say, oh well, someone did say that, and it all adds to the data.
Well, look, I'll put it this way. Like, he gives specifics in terms of, like, where to look, right?
Yeah,
It's hard to I mean, if you take any one particular piece of testimony, and you can't really hang your hat on it, right? Like,
sure.
but you look at it, the preponderance, you look at the all the different people that come forward and state there is a much more compelling, high resolution 4K body of sensory data that has just behind this wall of secrecy. Well, yeah, is it frustrating? Hey, of course it is. But how are you going to how are you even going to go look for something that you don't even know exists? Right. So let's find out that it exists, give some parameters in terms of like where to look, and and it's got to start somewhere. I mean, it's just like reporting on this alleged encounter that happened in 1994 in Nellis test range. Can I prove it? Absolutely not. I would love to have the other people that were on duty come forward. I decided to report on that because I did a lot of digging for 8 or 9 months, and I finally got to the individual indirectly who allegedly debriefed all the on-duty military people that it happened to. This individual was not willing to confirm or deny or comment one way or the other. Didn't just say it didn't happen and didn't say that it did happen. It was like, I'm aware of the incident and no fucking comment, right?
Right.
I was like, okay. And then I eventually talked to a couple of people that I trust. Could they be, you know, wrong? Absolutely. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. But they basically, I said, do you believe it happened or not? Yes, we believe it happened. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to report on it. And I with the idea that we have a date, we have a location, we actually have names first and last of the other people. I'm not going to release those publicly. And let's hope some more information comes out. Let's hope there's some digging. Maybe Arrow gets notice of it and they dig on the inside with their clearances and they come up with something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's yeah. Again, another good point because the more little bits of information that we put out, it might just compel other people to come forward that do have information. Whereas if we don't bother putting anything out, when we just, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I had people that were very concerned when I told them I was doing a documentary on the Virginia case. Oh God, James, really? What are you doing? You're just coming off the phenomenon. You get all these intel people that are working with you. You just did an interview with the former Senate Majority Leader. Like, what are you doing? Now you're going to report on live aliens walking around this town? Like, what is seriously? you know, but but I did. I did, and I know it was going to be controversial, and I knew I was going to get flack for it. But you know, I don't, I don't I never ever would deliberately put out and never would I do that. Or a story that I really believed at the bottom of my heart that wasn't true, I wouldn't put it out there.
Right.
Is there always like a percentage of doubt? Of course there is with anything. But I lean more in the like I always try to think like if I'm presenting a case to a jury, right? Like, can I, what is it, persuading a jury beyond a reasonable doubt or beyond, not a shadow of doubt, but beyond reasonable doubt is like that something happened. And I feel like in a lot of the cases, Rua, Virginia, that's done. But the jury's still out on the encounter at Nellis. But I'm inclined to think that it very well did happen. But again, I can't prove that.
Now, one individual that featured in the program as well, Hal Putoff. Now, it seemed like you really kind of pushed Hal right up to the line, and it almost seems like. Well, let me ask you this: do you think Hal has been involved firsthand with these legacy programs?
So I have to be very careful what I say here, but let's just put it this way. I believe he's a firsthand witness. That's about as far as I'd be willing to go on it. That's what I believe. And the reasons why I believe that, I'm not going to reveal, but I believe that.
I can make assumptions based off of that, so that's fair enough. I understand and I appreciate that completely. Wow. What about let's talk about Kirk McConnell. It was really good to see Kirk McConnell step forward. He'd only recently retired, I think, in February of 2023 as a staffer on the Senate Armed Services Committee. So tell us about some of the meetings and things that he's been involved in.
Please, everybody listening to this, watching this, go to my X, formerly known as Twitter, at James C. Fox. I posted, I think it's probably 2 minutes, couple minutes. It's a snippet of a 3-hour thing we did on Reddit. And I don't know why I didn't ask Kirk this in the movie, but at least I asked him because a lot of times as a filmmaker, like how I got the documentary name Moment of Contact, because when I was with the girls that were allegedly standing 10 feet away from this creature in broad daylight,
Mm.
one of them locked eyes on this thing. I was like, if that really happened, could you imagine locking eyes with possibly an alien creature? Like that that moment, and I said, "Can you put me there? Can you put me in that space when that creature was up against that center block wall and you were standing there in the field and you stopped and time stopped and you locked eyes? That moment of contact, was there communication? How did you feel? Put me there, right?" And I'm thinking with Kirk McConnell, this guy allegedly, sat in not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, maybe 8, possibly 12 meetings in a skiff, top secret, first-hand witnesses, okay? These are the people that we all want to hear from. First-hand witnesses with the credentials, with the clearances, people that were vetted, okay? With sitting members of the Senate, probably Rubio and Rounds and maybe Schumer. I'm just guessing. He didn't tell me that. And you're listening to a first-hand witness talk about working on alien technology, right? And I'm like, could you, Kirk, could you put me in that room, please? What would it feel like? What was the atmosphere like? Was it tense? Was it serious? What was it like? Because imagine, like, I'm not asking any of your audience to believe it, but imagine, to suspend judgment for a moment, imagine if it really was true. We really did have a crash retrieval program and people on the inside that are working directly with this so-called alien technology, and members of the Senate and House are slowly meeting with these individuals and coming to the realization that there's been this massive cover-up. Just imagine hearing that for the first time and what that would be like. And Kirk puts us in the room and he talks about it. And that clip from Reddit is on my site. And do yourself a favor and go watch it, because wow, I've only had a handful of moments for me in my 30 plus year career where it's sort of time stops. Time stops. I don't know how to describe it. It's like your whole reality just distorts, and it's like the fabric of reality just, and because if true, and of course I believe it is, it's the biggest story ever. Period.
Of course, it really is. And that clip you mentioned, actually, I will actually find that clip on your X, and I will link that directly in the description of this video so people don't have to go and find it, because it really is. I've seen it. It is really an important clip.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, speaking of skiffs, you were in a skiff recently, if I'm right. Tell us about that.
So weird. Oh my God. So I can't reveal exactly why I was there, other than I was asked politely not to right now because it could interfere with their investigation. But there is some there we go again, footage that I've been after for quite some time, and I'm in touch with the individual that has it, and I've been trying to tear it out of his grasp. They became aware of it, and they wanted to meet with me and see if we could work together to get our hands on it. And so they did a background check, which took like 48 hours. And then I showed up and I met with a guy from Air Force Office of Special Investigations, met outside in the parking lot, walked me into this secure environment. I had to go through the metal detector, all the security. I had all my bags with me because I was going to get a flight. I was going to get a flight from DC right afterwards. So I had all my bags. I travel pretty light, but I had to go through the metal detectors and all that stuff. And then I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, am I really going inside? Like, oh, this is so crazy, And I'm the guy, the gentleman that I met with, nice guy, but very serious and very clean cut, and the suits, and just like you'd expect.
Yeah.
And then they had these like wall, I say wall, but maybe 5 or 6 of these glass tubes, almost like on a Star Trek movie, like these tubes, like glass circular tubes that were, I think they went from floor to ceiling, but maybe they didn't go that high. Maybe they only went up 8 feet or whatever. But they had one side would open and you'd walk in one person at a time, and then that would close, and then the other one would open, and then you walk through. And then we went to a locker, and I could get rid of all my electronics and phones and just everything, leave it all.
Yeah.
And then, just like you'd see, like that vault door looks like a door to a vault, all kinds of digital codes and stuff on there. I didn't really watch him punching the codes in because I didn't want to make, but I was looking at it and then opened that door and I was like expecting like 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 a war room, with a big circular table or oblong or whatever, oval table. But it was like the whole complex was one big skiff, and that's where Arrow was. Um, all domain anomalous resolution office. And this individual walked me in down the hallway and then stopped. And there was a door to my right that was closed, and there was a door to my left that was open, and there was a meeting going on, and probably 2 or 3 women and a couple of men sitting at a table having a meeting. And he stopped me, "Wait here for a second." So I'm standing there by myself, and I look over, and I can't help but look into the room. Obviously, it was right there, and I'm tuning in, like, what are these guys talking about? What else am I gonna do? Of course, I was gonna tune in. I'm tuning into their conversation. I'm looking, and this guy gets up quickly, gets up and closes the door,
Wow.
closes the door. And then John Kosklowski, who's the new head of Arrow, comes over, meets the other gentleman, and they go inside that other door. Inside we go. We all sat down together. And we start talking. I mean, it was really crazy. Like, I mean, these guys are they're people, they're humans, right? And that's how they knew who I am. I don't really know who they are, but I mean, but I was in the belly of the beast, and it was really an odd feeling. I never anticipated that I would. So I started talking about cases. It's like, there's this case. And I was like, who are these men in black? Like, they show up all over the place. They have this uncanny ability to like know about these different cases. And if there's evidence, it always disappears. And they're just sat there, like, kind of just sitting there. And I was like, and that at the end of the day, the vast majority of these things can and have been explained by, of course, conventional, but there's a core 10-15% that really defies, after an exhaustive investigation, a conventional. I think it might have even used the word terrestrial, and that they're probably going to be 15-20% that's going to be originating from a non-human intelligence. And what's the plan to tell the general public? And John Kosklowski goes, James, I can't even part my own hair without approval from the DOD. And you can quote me on that. You can say we met and then I told you that. And that, in a sense, to me was that neither one of them. And then the other guy goes, it's really funny, James, because in order to work for the task force, you have to have watched The Phenomenon. That's mandatory viewing. Isn't that crazy?
That's incredible.
And then he goes, God, that case in Africa with the children. I was like, I know, that's amazing, right? And so, but to me, John Kosklowski, the new head of Arrow, was basically saying, that's what he said. He goes, I didn't ask him, can I share that? He's right away, he just volunteers. You can say that. He said, I can't part my hair without approval from the DOD, which basically tells me that his hands are tied. It doesn't matter what conclusions that he personally draws or that Arrow draws. DOD is going to, DOD is going to approve what they can and cannot say. And now I don't know if he was implying that for both public consumption or if it was public consumption coupled with what he can reveal to Congress.
Sure.
I was certainly incredibly disappointed of Sean Kirkpatrick, the former head, and Gillibrand seemed to just be, just not questioning him at all. Very disappointing. In fact, I'm grateful to Sean Kirkpatrick, because one of the reasons why I got some of the people participating in my film was because what a horrible job he did in terms of transparency with his time as head of Arrow. So I'm optimistic. I'm certainly hopeful, and certainly from the other people that I've talked to, that this new gentleman is going to be far more. It's going to be better.
I hope so. I really do.
Time will tell.
That's it. It really will. Now, James, there's a case that I always kind of like to look back on, and it certainly features prominently in some of your older movies, and that's the Phoenix Lights case. And there's always been these rumors of this fighter jet that was sent up there to intercept this object that actually has alleged gun camera footage of this huge boomerang object. Have you heard anything about that footage?
Okay, so, well, here's what I do know. It was probably 1999, 98, 99. Yeah, I think I was working on Out of the Blue at the time. I was. I was working on very early stages of Out of the Blue. And I went to a barbecue with a friend, and she knew what I was in Phoenix for, investigating the case. And she goes, "You see that guy over there? Like, I've known that guy. He was working at Luke Air Force Base the night March 13th, 1997." I was like, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, he knows. He knows. That's that guy, you know." And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go over there." So I went over to talk to him, and I don't know if he confirmed at the time that he was at Luke Air Force Base, but he was like, "I'm not telling you anything. Like, don't even, just stay away from nothing." I was like, "Jesus Christ, okay." So I walked away from him, and then the night went on, and he was over by the barbecue, and I see him drinking beer. He's drinking beer, and he's drinking beer, and then he came up to me and he said, "I was there at the base, Luke Air Force Base, the night in question." And he said, I he mentioned DEFCON, and I don't know if he went to DEFCON 1, 2, or 3 or whatever, but he said DEFCON. I didn't know what DEFCON was at the time, but he said something about DEFCON, which would mean that the president of the United States would be notified, because it's kind of like an invasion, kind of. But again, I don't know what level he said DEFCON. I can't remember. But then they had to carry, they had to, the individual that was tasked with scrambling his F-16, I believe it was, to intercept this object, had to be carried out, lifted out of the cockpit after the incident, because he was so deeply, like, affected by whatever he saw, that he couldn't walk. Like, he couldn't even move. Like, he was just shell shocked. So they had to lift him out. But apparently, the military jet came out because the object was moving very slowly. It was a big boomerang shaped craft. There were a number of UFOs in the sky that night, orbs and all kinds of stuff. But the one in particular was like this massive boomerang shaped object that all the witnesses that I talked to said it was so big that it was like a mile across. Some people said 2 miles across, that it took like minutes to pass over their head, and that it had the ability to fly very, very slowly. And when the jet came up on it, I'm told, it just went into warp speed. Like, it just took off like impossible, just impossible. And that pilot had witnessed that, and apparently that just that yeah. So, I'd also talked what I would imagine that they have gun camera footage. Why wouldn't they? I mean, it was 1997. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was another individual, I believe it was an F-16 or maybe it was F-15. Frederick Clausen, he's in the movie. He's in the United States Air Force and former fighter pilot, and he had gun camera footage in 1980 over Europe of a football shaped UFO that he intercepted, and then it shot up into space. And he said that was confiscated, and that was 1980, right? I don't know again if it was an F-15, but he talks about it in the film. And so I would imagine in 1997, 17 years later, that he would definitely have had gun cam footage, particularly if he's going to intercept it. So, and I also interviewed the former governor of Five Simonton. I should get back in touch with him recently. We touch base a couple times a year, but he told me that there were jets scrambled that night. I should get him to look into that. I'll get him to look into that. Yeah, to find out. Yeah, yeah, to find out more about that, because let's see. How long ago was that? How long ago was that? Is that 30 years ago? No. 27 years ago? 28 years ago?
Getting on 30 years.
Okay, so coming up on 30 years. So if the pilot, well, it's 7 years after Calvine.
Yeah.
So the pilot is definitely retired, probably from the military, most likely. So fingers crossed,
That would be some testimony.
right? Wouldn't it be great?
That would be incredible.
Yeah. I mean, things are coming out. People are starting to feel like safer. Um, not as alone, right? So we're living in fascinating. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, I never thought. Excuse me, when I started making docs on UFOs, that I'd be sitting down with members of Congress, right? The United States Congress, and asking them on camera, "Do we have alien bodies and spaceships in our possession?" Are you kidding me? Like, never. I would have bet you all the money in the world that would have never happened, and here it is happening. Not only that, I'm not being laughed out of the room. I'm not being, like, banned from ever coming back to DC on the Hill. In fact, quite the contrary. So, interesting times, mate.
It is. It's amazing.
Isn't it?
It's mind blowing. You know, I've been doing this for close to 15 years, you know, research wise, and I never thought we'd be where we're at.
No, I know.
You know, I'd always hope.
Let me ask you, people have been, commenting on the difficulties of finding the program internationally. Do you know you're in England. How did you watch the program? You might have gotten a copy, but do you know other people that have managed to get, because it's on Amazon and Apple TV, and it's also on this other thing called PopNet on the Genius link. But have you heard anything about that? Is it difficult? Is it available?
It's available here in England. I've spoken to people who have watched it and they've had no problems. I have had a couple of people, I think one was from Australia, one from Canada, one from Germany, I think it was, were like, "Oh, I can't find it." And I was just like, "Well, you know, I sent them the Genius link and stuff like that, but I wasn't aware myself because, you know, like you said, I've got an advanced copy, luckily." So
Yeah. Anyway, if anybody does have difficulty, just, find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, James at James C. Fox, and I try to monitor my inbox as much as possible. So yeah.
I'll make sure to do that, James. But listen, one question before I let you go, James, is what is the next project other than this trip to Brazil? What else is on the agenda for James Fox?
I'm calling Leslie Kane in about 10 minutes because I want to do another event at the National Press Club, just like I did in 2007, with with everything's happening so quickly right now. I feel like that's the fastest way to get sort of information out, and also to uh, now's not the time to let up, right? So I've been at this for 30 years, 30 plus years, and I feel like the momentum. There's so much momentum, and we're all in this together, right? So it's like we all have different perceptions as to what's behind the phenomenon, but I think we can all agree that something truly inexplicable is going on. We're all in this together, and I feel like I want to push harder than ever before the next couple of years. And so I'm going to do an event, 99% certainty, at the National Press Club, probably April, May of this year. And I would film the whole event over a 3-4 day period, and then do sort of a 60-minute style editing, so you can crank that out and then put that out there. Probably do a sequel to the program, director's cut of Moment of Contact, going back to Brazil, and then maybe I'll take a little time off, but who knows?
Well, you know, I think you've earned the time off, that's for sure, James. But no, I think the momentum, like you say, is so, you know, it's moving so well right now. I think, you know, we've got to keep our foot on the gas. So listen, James, pleasure as always, my friend. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
No worries. And thank you to everyone, as always, for watching. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one.